welcome.
Clap.
Yeah, I clapped. Yeah.
Aye.
Alright, now everyone's ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Saman, once again, welcome. It's really good to have you here. For anyone who doesn't know you, who doesn't know what you do, you're a music producer, music writer, podcaster, creative director, music journalist. Have I missed out on any other?
Basically, he's very multi-talented.
Yeah,
I mean,
for
yeah.
sure. Thank you. You know, I didn't want to be the one to say it. Also, I started out in film and TV, so
Yeah.
filmmaker
Right, there
as
we
well.
go.
Done a couple
Filmmaker as well.
documentaries and
Yeah.
short films. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
it's been a ride.
no,
It's been a ride.
You're a super talented person, and we'll get into why you're so talented. But one of the reasons why we decided to have you on, we came across you in an article that was like, the most promising Arabs under the age of 40 in America. And we read a list of the people you worked with, and you collaborated with people, whether this is through producing or writing or interviewing, people like Drake, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Bun B,
A$AP Rocky,
Hannibal Buress, who's a very funny comedian, and you just had such a diverse
Colbert,
list of
Stephen
people.
Colbert, yeah.
So before we get into all of that, was it always gonna be music? Did you come from a musical family? How did that happen?
I think. Well, the first thing that I want to say before we get too deep in this is I want to make sure y'all know that like I'm repping Lebanon while we're recording this. I'm gonna throw my jacket on in a second, but I just want y'all to know like Lebanon is with me. So
Thanks for the love.
Look, you
Thanks for the love.
you can always wear a wife beater as long as you're repping Lebanon. I think that should be a saying.
No wife beating. I'll call it a tank top. I'll call it a tank top.
Tank top, fair enough.
I'm gonna throw this jacket on. Hold on. Give me like 2
Fair
seconds.
enough.
One sec. All right, there we go. I'm back.
Cool.
Yeah, I think music was always going to be a thread for me. I didn't know that I came from a musical family until maybe like 5 years into my career, 6 years into my career. And then I found out that like my dad and his siblings had a rock and roll band in Palestine called El Bara'im. So when I first started out, it was, I think, probably in terms of family, there's two sets of people who really inspired me. My parents, like for sure, we listened to a lot of music in the house, so I developed like a real strong like love and appreciation for music through them, and they were playing a lot of like funk and blues and jazz and like classic rock. Those are kind of the genres that my parents were into. And then my oldest cousin Yezin, who was like the only like boy cousin I had growing up, he was the one who introduced me to rap music. So I had my parents who gave me the music from their generation, and then I had my cousin Yezin who was like, okay, this is what our generation's gonna listen to.
Yeah.
And so I just had like I always knew that I felt passionate about music, like based on how I listened to it, which was like very obsessively. So then when I started my career, I think that, looking back, yeah, there's always, no matter what like thing I'm doing, no matter what facet I'm in, there's like always a thread of music in the work that I do.
And you mentioned that your dad was in a rock band in Palestine, which I don't know why that's just such a funny sentence. Like, yeah, my dad was in a rock band in Palestine. what time period was this?
So what's crazy is they were actually like the first original like rock and roll band in Palestine. So it wasn't like they were just in one of the bands. It was like basically they started in like 1966, and there were a couple other bands that were happening like a little bit before them. There was like this Armenian Palestinian band called the Flintstones,
Nice
among
name.
others. And yeah, I love that name. And my dad's band, I think the Flintstones were kind of like, it was their friends, and they were like, that was kind of like their inspiration to pick up some instruments. But then so my dad's band was called El Bara'im, and after 1967, they started to write their own music, and not just, basically everyone at the time had been just like doing covers of like
Cover
popular
band,
songs.
yeah.
And so they were the first band to like say, oh, let's write about what's happening in society. So they're
And was their music at the time only like well like received in Palestine, or was it able to reach a more international audience?
That's a really good question. I think that like one of the sad things or like bittersweet things to think about in terms of like growing up, well, they weren't under occupation at first, but after 67, is that they were like really popular in Palestine. So they like when I went a couple years ago, my uncle was showing me like all the different venues that they played in, and they were playing in like venues that were like hundreds of seats, and then the biggest one was like almost 1,000 seats, and they were selling them out. And so I feel like even here in the States, like if you as an artist, if you're starting out and you're selling out like 200, 300 capacity venue, like that's something to be proud of. So the fact that they were able to do that in Palestine is amazing. But then the downside of it, obviously, when you're living life under occupation, there wasn't an infrastructure for a music industry. It just wasn't going to happen, you know. And it's crazy because there's so much great rock and roll that came out of Lebanon and Egypt around the same time. And I always think like if they had like freedom of movement, if there had been infrastructure there, either they could have recorded actual albums in Palestine, or they could have gone to Beirut and recorded something. You know what I mean?
I'd also say censorship, mass censorship at the time, even more than now, played a very big role when it comes to like limiting and oppressing artistic views and basically the noise of many up-and-coming artists at the time.
Yeah. That's
100%.
You're saying that censorship happened in Lebanon, or?
No, in both, because like at the time, you know, you didn't have social media, you didn't have the internet, and I think something that really helped up-and-coming artists in this day and age is that, whereas back then there was mass censorship, even up until this day and age there is censorship, but like the internet helps your voice and enables you through a variety of platforms to spread your voice to a masser audience, whereas back then, if the ruling parties did not really appreciate what you were saying in your songs, then they could easily limit and oppress your voice.
Especially when art is supposed to mirror politics and society. Like whenever we think of art, whether that be through film, music, or whatever format, you can usually dictate that with a certain era in history, a certain time period that mirrors society. Saman, I've seen you speak about the blues a lot and speak about how important the time frame was in America for the blues to come out, why the African-American community were singing about the blues and how that artistic format came out. And it's very representative of what was going on in North America at the time. And I think if you go back to Palestine, you know what I mean? Like in terms of censorship, what you can't say, and in terms of speaking out against injustice and what's going on in society, there's probably so much for Middle Eastern people to tap into, because I think in terms of a region, nobody faces more injustice than Middle Eastern people in terms of geopolitics and the people we have ruling over us and the issues we have in society. There's so much for artists to tap into. It's just allowing them that freedom of expression to do so. And I just kind of wanted to ask, so after you discovered this passion and you always said music, you went to UT Austin, right?
Correct. Yep. University of Texas at Austin.
Nice. And you essentially got your start, I was reading, because you worked, it was like in the Music Journalist Society, or you were working for like so there's a TV station at the university. It's like all student run, and so I started out there. I knew that there was a hip hop show, and I was very passionate about hip hop, but it was hard for me to find like the people who produced it. Like there was a bunch of different shows who all met at different times throughout the week, and so for like months I was trying to find the people who made the hip hop show, but until I found them, I auditioned and I got the job of hosting the entertainment news show. So it was like the college version of E! News or something. Nice.
So I wish I could. I'm sure the tapes exist somewhere. But so that's what I was doing in the meantime. And eventually, I did find the kids who produced the hip hop show, and that was very quickly like I realized like I'm really passionate about this. Because I'm passionate about it, like I have like this like constant motivation to like go out and do interviews, come back to the TV station, edit them, put them up on the channel. I got a lot of satisfaction out of that, and a lot of satisfaction out of creating a team to like produce that show.
And how did
And
you
Saman,
reach?
you always,
Yeah.
I've seen that on multiple occasions. You've always credited your success, and you're very vocal about it because of your university years. You always say that without those years in university in Texas, you wouldn't be where you are right now. And first of all, why? Why do you credit your success to your university years? And second of all, is there a particular experience during that time that shaped up who you are right now when it comes to your career trajectory?
Yeah, I think like I knew two things. I knew I was always passionate about music, and then I knew that I wanted to major in film, because there wasn't like a music journalism specific like degree or whatever. In general, I think my two threads are storytelling and music. So you're making films, you're telling stories. So I knew that probably I needed to end up in Los Angeles at some point. And I was like very, very close. I got into a school in Los Angeles, Cal State Northridge. And I had like gone out there to look at apartments, and I was like really close to going there. And then like in the last minute, I got accepted into the University of Texas system. So I think that it's crazy because if I had gone to that Los Angeles school, I wouldn't have done any of the things that I did in college. And the things that I did in college completely up till now completely like have carried me. So you're asking like what was an experience? The big like life changer for me was meeting this rapper named Bun B, who's from a rap group called The Legend, Bun B. He opened like all the doors for me. I'll give myself a little bit of credit. I opened some doors for myself, but he opened a lot of really big doors, really important doors, introduced me to a lot of people. And y'all were talking about Hannibal Buress. Like I met Hannibal through Bun in college. So a lot of the relationships that I still have right now that are very strong, like literally like Hannibal called me earlier today, started in college at UT in Austin. So it's really, every time I go back and I think about it, it's really wild to me to think that my ticket to getting to LA, it really had to go through Austin. If I had just gone to LA from the beginning, we wouldn't be talking to each other. Wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Which is crazy because when you're that age and you're really into music and that's your passion, and then you get the exposure of meeting people like Bun B, of meeting people like Hannibal Buress, like, was it overwhelming at that age? Because I remember Tariq and I, when we were 18, 19, I mean, basically the only thing we were doing is worrying about parties and what was the alcohol intake that we were going to have on Friday and Saturday. And you were out there networking and grinding and meeting all these heroes of yours. So was it ever overwhelming? Did the anxiety hit or how'd that go?
What I found out pretty quick, I mean, I think at that time I was really naive and I was like really wet behind the ears, and like I would like go into situations kind of like sometimes like a deer in the headlights, but like and generally I'm a pretty like timid person, but like I had just enough confidence to like walk into certain doors. But I think what helped a lot is that what I didn't realize that I was doing like in middle school and high school was I was studying music essentially. Like I was consuming so much music, not just hip hop, like all these different genres, very religiously. I was always making CDs for myself, mixed CDs for my friends, family, whatever. So that by the time, and I was really, really, really interested in like learning the history of the genres that I enjoyed. And because of the music that my parents put me on, as I was listening to rap music, I was hearing a lot of songs that sampled the music that my parents liked. So that made me really passionate about learning about more samples. Like if I heard other rap songs that I liked, I would say like, I would look in the CD, like in the notes and say, what's this sample? So by the time I got to a situation where I was in a room with Bun B, I could at least talk about things with like a certain degree of confidence, you know, and knowledge. Like I wasn't just like in there trying to interview famous people. It was like there was some intention behind it. Like I have listened to these people's music, I've studied their music, and now I want to talk to them about whether it's their music or philosophies on. So it's like, I think that I didn't realize it at the time, but all that time that I spent studying music like as a teenager is probably what like helped me not just
build that network,
get into doors, but I think people need to feel that like I'm coming at it from like a genuine place.
Genuine.
Yeah, rather than you know,
it made the
you're chasing clout or you're trying to use them or anything. And I think being Arab genetically helps you, man, because like we are really good at social affairs and networking. Like you just come in, like you come into a room and you look at Bun B or Drake and you're like Habibi, and it's done. Like you've set up that friendship for the rest of your life, and because you've met, and for anyone who can go on your Instagrams, you've met some ridiculously famous and talented people. You know, from the likes of Coldplay's Chris Martin, who you've hung out with a bunch of times, all the way to, like I would say, people like Drake and J. Cole and everything. Was there anyone who you were ever really starstruck by? Like anyone who was ever, you know, that pinnacle of the person to meet?
I think that for the most part, I've been okay in terms of being starstruck. It hasn't really happened. I can only think of like 2 times that it's really happened. Once was in college at the South by Southwest festival, which I think that was another really, like, I didn't know it, but choosing to go to school in Austin where there's a lot of major music festivals, that was actually incredibly helpful. But anyway, at South by Southwest one year, I think this was 2012, I was going to this one show. The only artists I knew who were going to be performing at that show were Slaughterhouse, which is like Joe Budden and
Eminem's rap group at the time.
Yeah, they were part of Eminem's group.
Yeah, who I'm not like crazy about, but I was just like, okay, it's a rap show, like I'll go check it out. But one of my mentors was one of the people who put the show on, so I was like sticking with her. She got me into the green room for Slaughterhouse. And I remember at the time they had a song called Hammer Time, I think. And
yeah, I know that.
Yeah, and so I remember being in there with my crew, my filming crew, and seeing MC Hammer and being like, "Oh shit, guys, like check it out, like that's MC Hammer, that's crazy." And that's not what I got starstruck by.
I can imagine. No, MC Hammer. Let's. I mean, he's a great guy. Everyone loves Don't Touch This. But if you get starstruck by MC Hammer as opposed to the people you meet, something will be wrong there.
I was just like, oh cool, like we're in a room with MC Hammer, and like we were like scanning. It was like a really big green room. There was probably like 50 people in there or something, and there was space to move around. So we were like, I was trying to see, because the thing about South by Southwest is like you never know like who's gonna be in a room, so you really have to study the room that you're in. So you make sure you don't miss anyone. And then as I'm scanning the room, like my blood just went cold. I like froze. I punched my cameraman like on the leg. I was like, yo, is that Kanye? And we're like whispering to each other.
No way.
We're like whispering to each other like as loud as we can, but as quiet as we can. And my cameraman's like, yo, that's Kanye. That's fucking Kanye. Holy shit. And like I was like, I'm gonna go up to Kanye. I have to do it. Like I'm in this room. Like I have to say something. But that was like the first time that I ever like really felt my body like feeling different because I was in a room with someone.
If you don't mind me asking, first of all, what year was that? Was it like before Kanye started becoming a bit like all over the place?
Yeah, it was 2012. So it was still the old Kanye. Still the old Kanye.
Yeah. And how was he like in person? Was he like how he is on TV and on the interviews, or was he a bit calmer, like when you went up to him?
He wasn't really talking that much. He was smiling, which he stopped doing shortly after that. I remember he was smiling, and I remember I went up to him and I was like, "Yo, Kanye, like I'm Saman, like I work at, you know, like I do interviews for like the university here, whatever," and like his bodyguard, like big old dude, like huge dude, just like put his arm down between me and Kanye, and he was like, "Yo, Kanye's not doing interviews right now." And I was like, I wasn't trying to get an interview. I just want to introduce myself. I just want to shake his hand, whatever. We did end up getting to take a picture later that night, which is like just a ridiculous. I look ridiculous in that picture, and so does Kanye. So that was one of two times I remember being starstruck, and then the other one was with the soul singer Bill Withers.
Oh,
And
yeah, of
just-
course, legend.
Yeah, just for like a totally different reason. Like I felt like that was actually during an interview. Like I felt starstruck. The interview was kind of sprung on me. I didn't have time to prepare for it. It was like a spur of the moment, and he wouldn't break eye contact with me, and that really
Wow.
messed me
He
up.
was staring at you the whole time.
Yeah.
He was staring straight at you.
Yeah, which
Wow,
most
that's a bit
artists don't
intense.
do that. Most artists like barely look at
Yeah.
you when you're interviewing them. But he wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop looking at me, and it felt like I didn't want to look away because I want to be rude, but I needed to look away to like think, and so I got inside my own head and I messed it up, and now he passed last year, R.I.P.
Yeah.
So I'll never
Rest
get
in
to
peace,
redo
Bill
that
Withers.
one. So, but got to
But
interview him.
that must have been crazy. I don't know if it was like a intimidation technique or anything, or if he was just so locked into the discussion. So maybe if anything, you should look at it positively. He must have been so interested in what you guys were talking about that he was.
I asked terrible
locked in.
questions. I asked.
Okay.
That's why
I was
like,
trying to
always
help
wished I
you
could
out,
redo
man.
it. Thank you,
I was
man.
trying
Thank
to.
you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to make sure
He's like,
sleep
I
well at
regret
night.
this big time. He's like my fucking agent.
My one chance to talk to Bill Withers.
Who is this kid? Who is this kid?
Who is this kid? And one of the things that I read about you as well is that you credited your progression in the music scene to being Palestinian was a huge help for you in terms of networking, in terms of having an ear for music. What do you mean by that? Why was being Palestinian such a huge help?
I think for two reasons. One is a lot deeper than the other one. The deep reason is that I think when you come from a place or people that have seen like violence and oppression or repression, it helps you kind of instantly relate to other people who have been through that. And so I feel like part of the reason I gravitated so much towards hip hop was the fact that I knew that it came from people wanting to talk about like the shitty conditions they lived in, and those conditions being shitty because of how the government treats them. So I related to it like very, very quickly. And of course, as we know, like there are plenty of rappers who have talked about Palestine on songs. So as I got to meet these rappers, I had an instant icebreaker. I could say, oh, I'm Palestinian. But then the surface level, like the not as deep thing, is that like a lot of rappers are Muslim, like, and a lot of the Muslim rappers are really good. So they were people I wanted to talk to, and because they're Muslim, even though they're not Arab, they're Black Muslim, they can speak a little bit of Arabic, and so a lot of times that was an icebreaker for me, is being able to like go up to someone and say like Assalamu alaikum, like what's going on, and that instantly like gave us like a connection that was different than usually everyone else in whatever room we're in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Saman, because you said that you've been hanging out with a lot of rappers over the past few years, and rap music originated from these African American people rapping about how they've been oppressed in American society for many years and talking about their daily lives, basically. And I feel, the similarities, especially like maybe with Lebanese, Syrians, Palestinians, is that in the Middle East, in this region, there's also a lot of oppression. And I've been keeping up with Middle Eastern hip hop maybe for the past 3 months, and I've been seeing a lot of names that are starting to gain, I wouldn't say international recognition, but more recognition in the Middle East. And I feel that, first of all, if you're looking at culture, there's a lot of cultural things that people in this area could rap about. If you're talking about oppression, there's a lot of things that people can rap about. But I feel that the step that needs to be taken right now when it comes to Middle Eastern hip hop breaking through is being able to creating a sound that will resonate with an international audience. I think me and Rayan once spoke about how like you have reggaeton. It doesn't really rap about oppression, but you have a sound that's becoming more
the sound
mainstream.
You mean like the
You have grime music in the UK, which over the past 6-7 years has broken through to an international audience. Rap music was able to break through in the 90s. So do you see, especially because you're very experienced in this industry, do you think that maybe within the next 10 years you can have a certain sound from Middle Eastern hip-hop which could resonate with the international audience?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. right now, like I'm hearing like there's like it may become its own like little subgenre called like Pali pop, like Palestinian pop. And I've heard some good
What an
songs.
interesting name.
Yeah. But in terms of hip hop specifically from the Middle East, um, what I was talking to a friend about is, like I've heard like, like Moroccan trap, Libyan trap, like trap from like North Africa, like in Arabic, which is cool and fine, and I enjoy it. But I think for me, what really is going to have to happen, which I think you mentioned, Tariq, is we need to hear like a tangible Arabi rap sound. Like when you like when someone puts on like Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg song, like you can immediately say, "Oh, that's West Coast." Like there's an identifiable West Coast rap sound, or like the old 80s, 90s New York rap, or the Texas rap down here, or Memphis. Like they have a sound, and you can identify it really instantly. So for me, I think that's the last missing like link. Like we have rappers from all different countries in the Middle East who are very talented. But if whoever's producing, I don't know a lot of producers in the Middle East, but whoever's doing the beats, like once we figure out how to hone in on a sound that sounds like us, and then eventually it will break down into like, oh, this is like Levantine rap, this is like North African, this is Gulf, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even small.
That's the thing though, because like there was this really big Egyptian trap artist that has blown up over the past 2 years, and I saw an article about him, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna check his music out. When I listened to his music, it was basically as if Travis Scott is singing in Arabic. Like literally, it sounds the effects sound identical to Travis Scott, and that kind of, even though he has a huge following, this guy at the moment, it kind of annoyed me because, as you said, like our own cultural sound is way different than like Western sounds and trap beats and stuff. So as you said, like I feel the problem with what many artists are doing is that they're not actually trying to stay true to their roots, and they're trying to incorporate Western sounds. And I think there has been success to a certain extent with certain Middle Eastern artists like Mashru' Layla. I'm sure you're familiar with them, the Lebanese band. They were able to incorporate, and we need more artists like them who are going to incorporate more of their domestic roots and just export it to the West. And look at them, they've had like a decent amount of success.
It's pretty natural for people to want to make to try and recreate the sounds that they enjoy in terms of music, but I'm also not worried. Like just my own experience growing up in Houston, like the sound of Houston rap had to evolve. The early Houston rappers, they all just sounded like New York because that was the only there wasn't even West Coast rap to emulate. So I think there will always be that first generation of rappers who sound like whatever was out at the time. So it doesn't surprise me that there's like a huge wave of like Arab trap music, but I think that what will happen naturally, like it happened in Houston, we developed our own sound down here. Like the first big rap act from Houston was the Ghetto Boys. Most of their stuff sounded like New York rap. It was using the same samples in the same kind of way, but then we had like UGK, and they sounded like the South. They were like the group that first really sounded like Texas. So it'll be natural. It's probably happening right now. There's someone probably in a home somewhere in Lebanon or Palestine or wherever,
chalking shit up,
making it right now, and we'll hear it in a year or two or something like that. So I have confidence.
Hopefully.
Do you think that comes from, like, as a producer, as a writer, as someone who's seen the industry, and what do you think? How? Because we can talk about creating a sound, but what needs to go into creating a sound? Is it sampling instruments within the region? Is it looking historically at some of the old sounds and creating a fusion with this kind of new trap wave and these new sounds? What specifically needs to go into creating a sound? Because for anyone who doesn't know, who isn't into music, we talk about rap specifically from the South or from the West Coast or from the East Coast, but people might not know what we're talking about. So what goes into creating that specific sound?
Yeah, like with West Coast rap specifically, what's kind of wild is like there's like one instrument that connects like all West Coast music, even before rap music, which is like the theremin that like was originally from the Beach Boys, and that like woo, like that sound that you also hear it in early Snoop Dogg and early Dr. Dre. So that is like an instrument that I would imagine Dr. Dre really strategically picked. You know, I don't know if he was listening to the Beach Boys in the studio, but when
I
you
would have
hear
loved
the
to
Beach
see
Boys, you think California. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
It's all over his Chronic album.
yeah, exactly.
The Chronic album, that sound is all over
Yes,
it.
yes, exactly. So I think you're onto something there. I think what it's probably going to be is someone using one of our instruments in just the right way, and probably what will happen is there will be like a wave of artists who do it in a way that's like very 1 + 1 = 2, and it will still be good and we'll enjoy it. But then what will come after them will be people who do it in a way where like 1 + 1 = 4. And so our like Arab instruments will be incorporated, Arab samples will be incorporated, but it will have like a result that's like greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what I'm really looking forward to in terms of like Arab hip hop.
I'm looking forward to that. I think we're seeing a mini resurgence, I think, in general in Arab art. I think with shows like Rami, for anyone who hasn't watched that, and just a lot of what I'm seeing on social media, is I think there's a lot more representation going on of the Middle East in global media and in entertainment. And I think it's only a matter of time until music catches up, because there is a lot of talent. There's a shitload of talent, and I think there's so much to tap into being Middle Eastern. You're talking about, thought it was saying, a depression and everything we've gone through here. I mean, you can definitely tap into that for artistic purposes and values. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who's been in the scene a lot and has spoken to a lot of really powerful people, I wanted to know, there seems to be in Hollywood a fear of speaking out in favor of Palestine. Like, I remember I found an article the other day by The Guardian, and it was Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz. They were tweeting or something. This goes back to 2014 when there were massive clashes between the Israeli government and Hamas. And they were tweeting something like "Free Palestine" or "Help Palestine." Rihanna came out on an Instagram post, something that said like "Support Palestine." She deleted it 8 minutes later. Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem deleted it after the backlash they received later. A lot of really big people in Hollywood came out and criticized them and said that they were supporting terrorist acts. So I wanted to know, why is Hollywood so afraid to speak out? I mean, they speak out on every single injustice going on in the world. Like anything that's like a fad going on, Hollywood will speak out and being supportive. But when it comes to the Palestinian cause and the injustice that's happening in Palestine, people are really afraid to touch that.
Yeah, I think I mean APAC has done a great job, you know what I mean, of making it taboo. I think about this so much, like when Lupe Fiasco was first speaking out like about Palestine, he did it at a time when he had like almost no support, and there weren't even really any like Arabs in the business to like embrace that, him doing that with. Like, he really put himself out there by doing that, and I think his career probably suffered for it. Not, I won't say that's the entire reason that his career suffered. I think there's other factors too, but I think now it's a lot better. Like, I'm noticing a lot more artists are speaking up and doing it doing it with more confidence. I still think you're right that there is, like, it still does feel taboo in certain ways. Like there's this Palestinian comedian named Aaron Cater. He had I can't remember if it was a joke or just something he said, but he was like, like, if it's taboo to talk about Palestine, like, imagine how it feels to be Palestinian. And I was like, damn, like, yeah, that's really for real. But in terms of Hollywood, I think, part of it is, like, Israel is like settler colonial project, and there weren't Arabs really that much in, or specifically Palestinians that much in the United States even until after 1967. So if we're talking about, like, representation in Hollywood, we definitely, I don't even know if there were Arabs even doing anything until the 90s or something in movies. So we
had
definitely
Danny
did not get a
Thomas,
head
who was
start.
Lebanese.
Wait, who's Danny Thomas?
You know Danny Thomas? Danny Thomas was like he was a relatively big actor, I think in like from the 50s or 60s. He was like a big comedian, and I only found out that he was actually originally Lebanese. Like his name is something like, I mean, I don't know his last name, but it was something like Danny Khouri, and he changed it to Danny Thomas to acclimatize to Hollywood. And I remember
Danny Thomas.
Danny Thomas, yeah, he was like a big comedian in the 50s or something, and he was actually
I'm searching him up.
he was actually Lebanese, and I remember like that was the first probably sign of representation, because my parents were fans of his, and they spoke to me about him. There was also Paul Anka, who's Syrian, I think. So there was very minimal, I think, representation. But even those artists who did have Arab roots, I don't think they properly express those roots in media. I don't think they were maybe allowed to.
They
express
felt
those
that they
roots
had
in
to
media.
hide themselves, you know.
Exactly, they felt that they needed to hide. And
On
I
a
hope.
side note, Danny Thomas's name is Amos Kairouz.
There we go. Exactly, Kairouz was close. I said Khouri. Khouri is the most typical like Lebanese Christian name.
Yeah, I think it's definitely opening up a lot, which is really exciting. You know, that we could be entering an era where there's, you know, you don't need to hide like where you come from at all. You made me think of maybe you already have heard of him before, but there's like an old rock and roll dude named Dick Dale. You heard of him?
That's the best porn star name ever.
It is, yes, yeah. He should have done porn.
He should have done porn. That
least.
was a big niche that he missed out on.
But he's Lebanese. I can't remember his Arabic name, but he's like one of the greatest surf rock guitarists of all time.
Wow.
He changed his name to Dick Dale, and he did the theme song from Pulp Fiction is him.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and that's a Lebanese dude. So
You know his
yeah, but
original
he's,
name?
you know, I don't remember his original name. I can't remember.
So hopefully we get into the era of seeing no more Danny Thomases, Danny Kairouzes, no more Dick Dales, probably, I don't know what his name was, Anthony.
Oh, here's his real name. His real name is Richard Mansour.
Richard Mansour. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a classic over there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I hope we do get to that point where, you know, you do find proper representation. Like we were saying beforehand, I think the scene is going to grow and it is going to get better. And I think when I've researched you and I've looked at you, and you, for me, and maybe you can confirm or deny this, you encapsulate the American dream. You're a Palestinian kid who grew up. I know this is maybe I'm putting a bit too much pressure on you. I mean, I basically turned you into the Great Gatsby, but you're a Palestinian kid who raised in the US, really loved music, and now you've had this really cool entrepreneurial career, meeting all your heroes. So do you think that the American dream, as you know, they like to sell it to us, is real, and that you kind of are an example of this?
That's a good question too. Yes and no. I have gotten to do all these amazing things that would definitely have been much harder to do had I grew up anywhere else. But at the same time, it hasn't made me a lot of money. So, you know, let's talk again, like in like 5 or 10 years. And
Who needs
hopefully,
money?
yeah. You know, I just, you know, a little padding, a little emergency fund, like pay
Yeah.
off my student loans, like these kinds of things. My career hasn't panned out that well yet in terms of that measure, but by every other measure, absolutely yes, yeah. It's been, I'm gonna have to write a book one day for sure.
I think those other measures, though, obviously, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, you know, fucking Woodstock '60s hippie. Money's not important, man. You just need to chase the dream. Money is very important, and we all need to find a way of accruing it. But I think you know, you're still very young, and to have the network you have, to have had the exposure you've had in a field that, number one, is notoriously hard to break into, especially being this Palestinian kid with no roots in the hip hop community, is very impressive. And look, the future is endless, man. Honestly, I'm sure you're gonna do great things. You literally just produced a song, and I gave you massive props for it because it's dope. Baby Please Don't Go, which is, do you want to explain what that song is?
Yeah, sure. It's it's like one of the like most recognizable like blues standards. It's been covered by everyone, like literally everyone, like Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, The Doors, you name it. And it basically came from like I was just thinking. It came from this project I'm working on about my dad's band, because as I was like getting ready to put their music out for the first time, I was talking to my dad and my uncles and like asking them, you know, like when you were making this rock and roll, did you have an understanding that this came from the blues? Like, did you know that in the moment, or how did you find out about the blues? And so they were very like honest with me. They said, you know, we only knew what the radio played and what the records were that we could get our hands on. And so they had to find out about the blues. Like they had to piece it together. They didn't have the internet. So it took them many years to come to that understanding. So I started to think like what would their version of the blues have sounded like? You know, what might have been a song that they would have covered if they had, you know, really, if there was like blues being played on the radio at the time. And this song, I think, is like, there's a very good chance it would have been this one. So I just wanted to hear what the blues would sound like on our instruments. And it turned out pretty good, I think. And my goal is that I can turn it into like a full album, and try and get some of these collaborations between Middle Eastern artists, Arab artists, and like American artists, specifically like Black American artists.
I think it was. Yeah. Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
Oh no, like that would be quite cool, because I think it would be a very interesting perspective, seeing if you can get like people from the Arab region and at the same time letting them collaborate with African Americans and just relating their experiences in a weird way, even though like their experiences are different, but at the same time they're very similar. And there was this thing I wanted to ask you before we get into another topic, because I've seen you, and it ties back to what you were talking about, like your career choices and money. And you've been also pretty vocal about following your passion, and you've also always said that your university years truly shape up what your passion is. And I've heard you say once in an interview that once you find that passion, the most important thing you do throughout your life is make sure that you follow that passion and you commit to that passion. Whether that passion is a hobby, that's something else. But I seem to be at a crossroads myself as to, being able to differentiate work and passion. And how have you been able to do that? Because sometimes people might be passionate about something, but then you're talking about, will it give you financial reward? And
that's like, I'm right there with you, man. It's definitely, it's really tough. I know for a fact, like I could be doing a lot better money wise if I had like stuck with certain things or kept going down certain roads. But even like my last job in LA, I was working in Hollywood. I was working at a movie studio, which was really cool and felt like a culmination of, I got my film degree. Now I'm working in Hollywood, and my boss was the guy who ran MTV for like 30 years. So it was like the perfect, on paper, it was like the perfect like intersection of film and music for me. But what happened was that like what they sold me on didn't end up being like what my job was. They said I was gonna have a lot of like creative freedom and be able to make shows and do all these things, and that started disintegrating, and I was like very jaded by the end of it. And what I learned from that is like, I mean, it was worth it. I don't regret that experience, but what I learned from that is that after that, I'm going to be very particular and very sacred about the work I choose to take on, even if it's not so much money up front. I know that like if I save my energy for the stuff that I'm really, really passionate about, it's gonna manifest itself later on down the road in really, really positive ways. And like
I think
that's something that like.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I thought you were done. The internet lagged a bit.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I only know this and can say it confidently is because I've already seen it happen. Like, to get that Hollywood job at that movie studio, I made a short film about Hannibal Buress. I got a bunch of people in it. Drake is in it. Chris Rock is the narrator. All this stuff. It's very silly. It's not very well done. I didn't have any money, but the CEO of this movie studio found out about it, and so when I went in to do my interview, I thought I was like buttoned up and like thought I was gonna have to answer all these formal questions, and instead, like when I sat down in his office, apparently he's not only is he friends with Chris Rock, but he produced Chris Rock's first movie. I sat down in his office and he was like, "All right, so how'd you get my friend Chris to narrate your shit?" I was like, "Okay," and then we just like, yeah, not formal at all. And then we just like talked shit for like an hour, and then I got the job. And that was a passion project. That was me having a crazy idea and seeing it through. And so to get before that, my job before that was, and I met Hannibal in college, doing what I was passionate about. My job before that was I worked at P. Diddy's TV network at Revolt. And the reason that I got that is because I made these documentaries about UGK, which led to me getting a job at the Roots website, OKPlayer, which led to me going to Atlanta to cover a festival out there. And while I was there, someone from Revolt was there as well and was like, "Oh, you should come to LA and come by the office." And then between that moment and getting the job, I was Rich. You remember Rich Homie Quan? Remember that?
Yeah.
So he was in Houston, and I got asked to like film a day with him or something, like follow him around, film. And at the end of the day, I remember I was just telling a friend of mine this last night. The CEO of his label, which is called Think It's a Game. This guy's name is Fly. He sat me down in his car. I can't remember what kind of car it was now, but it was a nice car. He sat me down in his car, and he was like very like movie like cinematic moment. He's like, "All right, kid. So what do you want to do? What do you want to do?" And I, had just graduated college. I was trying to find a job, and I was like, "Well, I have a camera. I like to interview people. Like something to do with that. I don't know. I couldn't put a job title on it, but I know that I'm passionate about this. Is what I want to do." And so he says, "All right, hold on." So he calls up this guy named Tuma Basa, who was like one of the execs at Revolt, and he was like, "Yo, Tuma, I got this kid with me right here. He's really passionate. He just ran around with us all day filming. You need to make sure he's on your radar." Fast forward a few months. I don't think that call got me the job, but a few months later,
it helped lay the foundations. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I can look back on my career and know confidently that when I was exactly chasing the things that I was passionate about and only what I was passionate about, they led to bigger things. So whether it's this music thing or my podcast or whatever it is, like I know that by focusing on these and putting my energy into them, they'll pay off.
And that's another reason as to why like a lot of artists right now, you're seeing this trend where a lot of artists are starting to move away from being signed by record labels at such an early stage in their careers and become more independent. Because if you're independent, the financial reward and maybe even exposure may not be as great as that if you are with a label, but the risk is actually, the risk of actually doing something that will resonate with people and you having your own creative input onto it. Yeah, there might be risk, as I said, like financially, but you taking control of it from a creative perspective, you're your own boss. And long term, if you're successful, then the financial reward is way more lucrative. And you, as I said, you have control about everything, and you could network and you can meet people. And I think like your stories are testament to that, because you ended up producing a lot of like independent documentaries or mini films or music, podcasts, and through your independent work, that got you exposure to get jobs in a variety of fields. And like, for instance, working with Diddy, I had that movie with Chris Rock and Drake. I think that was independent as well, right? That was like an independent project. That's testament to that.
And it will continue to set you up for future opportunity. Like if you wake up in 1 year and you have a great idea, you can now look through your phone and you have the people who can take that idea from being an idea into conception. So yes, maybe the money isn't great right now, but you've set yourself up for a lot of maybe very cool future opportunities if the idea strikes. And Fawda and I have spoken about this so much. Your career and what you do, mainly it's obviously persistence and hard work and being smart and clever in how you work, but it's a huge amount of lucky breaks. Like so many of the people I can talk about in the entertainment industry, have gotten their platforms through lucky breaks. You know, Tada and I always have this conversation about what the fuck do we want to do with our lives? Where do we want our lives? Where do we want our careers to grow and take us? I never want to have that one title for the rest of my life, and I think Todd is the same. I never want to be, let's just say, you know, a podcaster for the rest of my life, or a banker, or a doctor. I think everyone here in this Zoom chat right now wants to pursue their passions and explore different avenues, and it's just about persistence and dedication and hard work. You might not make good money, Saman, for the next 10 years, but guess what? When you're 42 and you have that idea, all of that hard work that you've been doing for the past 20 years, all of that network that you've been building up, all of the groundwork and the foundations you've laid in your career earlier may come back. And that one moment that everyone sees with you where they think, oh, this guy's a huge success, look, he's on every billboard, he's creating companies, they'll think it happened overnight, but it's that 20 years of hustling and following your passion and grinding that's gotten you to that point, which I think people don't realize sometimes. So yeah, I know I sounded like Oprah Winfrey right now. I was trying to be very inspirational.
It's not linear, you know. It's not linear. It's not like you do this and then you get a bunch of money. It's more like a culmination of things. You have to do all these things all around here, and they all swirl around, and then eventually.
I think one cool thing that I got out of this podcast is like through most of the successful guests that I've met and had the chance to talk to, was realize that all these successful people, regardless of what field they're in, the common trait they had at a young age was that they were doing multiple things at the same time. And as Ryan said, they didn't just want to have this one title allocated to them for the rest of their lives. And they were hustling in different fields and working like mad throughout their younger years. And that eventually laid the foundations of success when it comes to long-term success. And another thing is that in this day and age, particularly, people focus on short-termism too much. People want that instantaneous success. They want to like, oh, Saman is working in music, so he should be blowing up within the next 3 months. If he doesn't blow up, he's a failure. And people do never have the long-term view of how your thing can resonate and stand the test of time.
Yeah. 1,000%.
100%. And I look, I hope, obviously, to have your voice in the entertainment and music sector and represent Palestine. And a perfect example is like the song I mentioned, Baby Please Don't Go. If anyone hasn't listened to that, we can put a link, because it's a really good song combining, you know, Arab sound with the oud that you guys sampled, and then blues music. And we want to see more of that. We want to see that divide. We want to see the fusion of Middle Eastern and American entertainment. And I think with people like you out there in the field and doing the work you guys are doing, we're going to see more of that. The future is bright for our region in terms of art. Definitely not in terms of politics. We're fucked on that front.
Forget that, man.
At least we can have some good art, though.
We can have some nice songs and some nice, you know, TV series. Like, thanks, Rami.
We can have some songs to
listen,
sing.
Rami, if you could fucking get me some electricity and some water in my country, that would be great. But at least from the artistic point of view, it looks bright. So, dude, honestly, it was a pleasure talking to you. You're a fascinating guy. And yeah, man, all the best.
Hopefully one day we'll be able to meet in person as well.
Inshallah. As soon as this COVID situation is over, I'm booking a trip. I'm gonna come. Yes, please.